Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Paint a Mini. So I figured we'll go ahead and kick it up a notch a little bit from the previous video that we had done where we just did Akachi on Yelly, and we did a kind of a slower paced sort of thing where we just took it one miniature at a time and we just used all of our dry brushing. But I figured let's go ahead and get back moving. So what I've got here, I've got a couple of miniatures that are from the Streets of Arkham expansion. We've got a couple of hired guns here, and then we've got a couple of these skeletons here. I thought we would go ahead and paint both of these guys. Now, one thing that I noticed right off the bat is that the skeletons are not exactly the same as their picture art there. They're not completely skeletal, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it's hard to sculpt a miniature and have it be entirely skeletal. It's just not very structurally sound. So it's wearing this kind of raggy coat right here with these shoes and that shirt underneath it. And what I kind of noticed after I was looking at the miniatures for the first time is that they're actually kind of similar to each other. So the skeleton isn't wearing a top hat here, but they're both wearing kind of a long coat. It's a little bit different and all that, but it's kind of similar. And they're both wearing, dress shirts and a tie. And I thought we would kind of have some fun. And why don't we go ahead and give their clothes the same sort of like coats, the same sort of colors. And that way it kind of looks like the skeletons are basically dead versions of the hired guns here. I thought that would be kind of fun. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the first thing that I did, as you can see, was I did a base coat of just pure white. Another thing you might have noticed, I don't know if the camera's picking this up very well, but something went weird with my can of primer, and there were some real bad kind of granules and all that came out of the spray. You can kind of see stuck to the sculpts. Those little pieces of kind of sandy bits on the miniature there, on the miniatures. Well, all four of them. They're not supposed to be there. So that's kind of weird, but we'll be fine. We'll make it work. So the first thing that I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to knock out the hired guns. And to do that, I'm going to start with some good old-fashioned honed steel right here. Get a little bit of paint at, and I'm not going to need very much at all. I think I can get away with using a medium round brush, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're not going to do anything too fancy. We're just kind of dabbing along the guns, and then we're going to move on. If you get a little bit of paint onto the fingers or the hands or anything like that, don't worry about it, because we're going to go over the hands with a skin color. And I kind of figured we would knock out the guns first, and I figured that would be a little bit easier to deal with. There we go. Now we got a couple of guns on one of them there. Let's go ahead and do the other hired gun here. Just going to do exactly the same thing that we did just there. Just really carefully going to go ahead and do... I guess, I don't know what types of guns these are. My guess would be they're probably M1911s, which I believe are a very, very common kind of semi-automatic pistol. That's what I assume that they are, just by looking at them. And I think that they, that type of gun might have a little bit of a wooden hilt or a wooden handle. I don't know the terminology. Grip, I don't know. But I figured we would just make it a little bit easier, save some time, and we'll just make it all one color, and that way we don't have to mess with getting really fine details, in between, their fingers and all that good stuff. That'll be fine. There we go. Alright, so now we've got both of the pistols there, both of the handguns for the hired guns. So I just rinsed my brush off. And I think the next step, we'll go ahead and just move right on to the skin that they have. So I'm going to shake up my bottle that I've got here really quickly. And we've got some tanned skin right here. This is just a really basic tanned skin color. We're going to use that for these big, bulky, angry mobsters. And there's not too much skin that we have to do. It's basically just going to be their faces. And I'll continue using the same brush that I was using. It's just going to be their faces and their hands. And that will do it for the skin. I didn't think about it, but it looks like they've got some hair hanging down underneath the back of their hats there, you can kind of see. I'm just going to go over that with the skin color. I'm not going to do anything too careful or fancy or anything like that. I'm just going to knock this paint job out kind of quickly here, and they're monsters, so they're not going to be on the board quite as frequently as the actual investigator miniatures will be. So, you know, we don't have to stress ourselves out over all the fine little details on these guys quite as much as we might do with any investigators that we paint. There's one, his face. Now let's go ahead and do his hands. That'll be fine. It's not super fancy, but that will do in a pinch. So let's go ahead and do the other guy right here. I think I just got a little bit of paint on the gun there when I didn't mean to. That's okay. That'll be fine. I don't think most people will even notice, so I'm not going to worry about it. All right, and there we go. So now we've got the skin and the guns knocked out for those hired guns there. Rinse that brush off. All right, and next up, we're going to go ahead and do the bones on the skeleton. Now, like I was saying, they're actually wearing a lot of clothes, so their bones are not actually super prominent, but they're still there. It's still their arms and their heads. And what we're going to do for that is we're going to take this fair highlight color. It's not quite white. It's got a little tiny bit of sort of a tannish tint to it, but it's a very, very fair color. And we're going to use that to represent our sort of bone color. And I think that that will look pretty good. And I think that because I don't need to worry about any guns or hats or anything like that, I'm going to bump my brush game up a little bit to knock it out a little bit faster. And I'm going to be using a medium Citadel base brush. And you know what, I'll even do the thing that I do where I'll just take my little thing of water here and I'll just kind of dip the tip of my brush into the water a little bit. That'll water down the paint. Load it up. And then let's just go over all of the bones. One arm down. Let's go ahead and do his head. Might have been a little bit too much thin down there, but that's okay. We'll be fine. Let's do the other one. All right, that was a really quick and simple way to do the bones on those skeletons right there. So now they've got their bones showing. I'm gonna rinse my brush off. All right, and then next up, we're gonna move on to the pants that they're wearing. Now, I imagine that the pants that they're wearing are gonna be a slightly different color from the jackets that they're actually wearing, or the coats, I suppose. So what we're going to do is, and I kind of figured we would do sort of a brownish color scheme for all of them. You know, brownish, tannish kind of color scheme, so that's what we're going to do here. All right, so I'm going to start with this dark dark shadow color here. Just a really, really dark brown color, and I figured that we would use that for the pants. And then we'll go from there. And I think I can, what do I want to? Yeah, let's try it. Let's try to use the medium base brush that we were just using. Let's see if we can make that work for the pants that they're wearing. And like I said, I imagine that the skeletons are just kind of whatever, versions of the hired guns. So we're just going to use the same colors for both of them, for all of the different things that we're going to be doing here. So I'm going to be using this color for the hired guns' pants, as well as the skeleton's pants. Got a little bit of water under my brush. Don't want to completely soak it. Let's just thin the paint down a little bit. That's one of them down. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, you know, one thing, while I'm painting this, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit. So as I'm painting this, the other day, day before yesterday, the new expansion to Mansions of Madness finally came out, and that was called Horrific Journeys. So I went and I picked up a copy of it, and I think that whenever my wife gets home from work tonight, we are going to do an unboxing video. And I don't know if I'll be able to post that video before or after this one. I have no idea what my editing process is going to be like, but you can expect that shortly if it's not already posted. If it is posted, I'll put a link to the description below, or a link to it in the description below for this video. And if it's not been posted yet, just keep an eye out. Okay, but I did the hired guns right there. And now we're moving on to the skeleton. But yeah, I'm really, really excited for that Horrific Journeys expansion. I really, really like the scenarios that kind of get away from the mansion setting and kind of open it up a little bit. And it looks like all of the scenarios take place... It's called Horrific Journeys, and it looks like each scenario takes place in a different moving vehicle of some kind. One of them takes place on a dirigible, another one takes place on a train, and the other one takes place on a boat, like on a ship. So I am looking forward to those scenarios, and I'm looking forward to looking at the tiles that come with them and all that good stuff. Yeah, I'll do that here shortly. Might need to get out a little bit more paint. I'm starting to run a little bit low. Might be able to get both of the skeletons here done, though. Just see how it goes. I think I've got enough paint here. I don't think I'll need to get out any more. Yeah, because we're finishing up this skeleton, and I think that I've got just the right amount of that dark shadow. Yeah, that'll be fine. Alright, so I'll rinse that off. Alright, and the next up, why don't we move on to the coats. Now, if we refer to the artwork on the hired gun here, he's got a gray suit. It's very, very much a sort of old school, maybe 1950s, but obviously this game takes place before the 1920s. But yeah, a gray suit. And I don't actually want to do gray because we've already done the zombies and the cult leaders wearing gray like that, and if I just do even more gray, I don't know, it's just going to look a little bit too monochromatic. So I kind of want to, change it up a little bit. We're not going to do anything too dramatically different, so all we're going to use is this earth brown color right here, just a little bit of a lighter shade of brown from that dark shadow, and that will make a good foundation for the coats and the hats that the hired guns are wearing as well. And I will continue to use that brush that we were using. I think that it's working out just fine. Get a little bit of water onto my brush. It's looking good. Okay, let's just get to it. Yeah, just a little bit of a lighter shade from the pants there, which is what we were going for. And then we're going to do something a little bit different with the tie as well. Probably thinking about doing a red tie, but I did the same thing with Charlie Kane, which was one of the investigators that came with before Horrific Journeys, the newest expansion that came out, which was, what was it called? Sanctum of Twilight. That's the expansion that Charlie Kane came with. We gave him a red tie, and we'll see how we're doing here. One thing that you want to make sure with these hired guns is that their coat is kind of hanging out the back there, but you can kind of see through it between his legs here. So just make sure you get that. Like that, like so. There we go, that looks nice. I like that. Let's do his bowler hat here. I believe that's the correct term for that. I don't actually know. If anybody needs to correct me in the comments, let me know, but I believe this is called a bowler hat. I'll need to get out more of this earth brown for sure in order to paint. Well, I'm doing all the coats with this color. So yeah, I'll definitely need to get out some more brown, but we'll get there in a minute. That looks nice. Okay. Set him there. Let's get out more of that earth brown. Kind of missed the top of this guy's hat a little bit. There we go. Little tiny dot. I don't know if I don't think I've talked at all about the scenarios that come with Streets of Arkham, but one of them, which I believe is called Gangs of Arkham, I really like that scenario a lot. It's got a lot of unique locations, there's a lot that goes on, it's not super combat heavy, so you don't need to stress yourself out too much about, dying or anything like that, but there's also still enough things that actually happen throughout the game that are, interesting and not just boring. Like, one of my problems with the scenario Rising Tide is that it's really, really long, and nothing really happens, and you basically just wander around the different locations, gathering clues for a sort of, you know, final climax or whatever. And it's really, really long and really, really boring, and nothing really happens. And Streets of Arkham, I feel like, is kind of like that a little bit, in that you're trying to solve a mystery and you're just kind of wandering around. Gangs of Arkham, I think I said, instead of Streets of Arkham. I don't know what I said. Whatever, you knew what I meant. There's stuff to do, and you wander around unique locations, but things actually happen, and it's not just boring and repetitive, and it's also not quite as long as Rising Tide. So, yeah, Rising Tide, I think, is kind of a snoozer of a scenario, but I do think that Gangs of Arkham is top-notch, really good stuff. I definitely... Yeah, just the Streets of Arkham expansion is really, really good, so I recommend that you get it. And then the Gangs of Arkham scenario is a fun one to play. It's probably one of my favorites, actually. Overall, between all of the downloadable, or all of the, you know, expansion scenarios, or even just core scenarios, it's probably one of my favorites. Okay. Oh. Let's get this thing that I mentioned earlier, this coat kind of showing between his legs here. Let's get that. Also a little bit of white showing here. There we go. All right, now let's move on to the skeletons. Skeletons. A little bit more water on my brush, not too much. There we go. The pose, or the sculpt for the skeletons, when my wife and I first saw them, when Riley and I first saw them, my immediate thought was, are they doing the Thriller dance? Because it kind of looks like they're doing a little bit of a dance number there with his arm hanging out. That's okay. Looks fun. Alright, that was easy enough. Knock out this last skeleton with this last bit of paint that we have. I don't know. Might need to get out a little bit more. We'll see. I think I might need just a little bit more. See if I can stretch this out at all. I don't know, maybe. That'll be fine. That'll be just fine. Okay. Alright, we don't have a whole lot more to do, actually. What I kind of want to do is I want to get their shoes really quickly, so I'm just going to use a basic black color for that. So I'm just going to use some pure black right here. And this is probably going to take not too long, because I'm not going to be worried about being too fancy with it or anything like that. I don't care if I get any black on the base, because I'm just going to paint the base with a different kind of black later on. I'll save you that detail. You don't have to see that if you're not interested. Also, because if you're just painting these miniatures as they come with the game, then you don't need to worry about the base, because the bases are a little bit different. I don't really like those big square bases and the pegs and all that come with the actual game. It's just a little clunky. It doesn't quite look right. I'm just not wild about it. So for all of my monsters, I ended up just chopping off the pegs at their bases and then just super glued them onto normal bases. You don't have to do that. You know, that's just a subjective thing. You can either do that if you want to do it, or you don't have to. It's up to you. But then after we do this, I'm going to go ahead and tag their ties as well. And then we're going to finish up with our good old handy-dandy Agrax Earthshade. And then that'll be it. There we go. That's one skeleton's shoes. That's another skeleton's shoes. So now we'll do the hired guns. And that's one hired gun's shoes. All right, and there we go. So that's the hired gun's shoes, both of them. Rinsing off my brush. Alright, and then last up, yeah, why don't we go ahead and get their ties really quickly. I don't know, yeah, just for a little bit of color, let's go ahead and just do, instead of just doing a tan or brown kind of thing, let's go ahead and do some red. So I'm going to grab some fire red right here. This is going to be, you know, it'll stand out a little bit. Oh, geez. Oh, my goodness. Okay, did not mean to get out that much paint. That's okay. We will make this work. But the red will kind of blend with the brown a little bit, so that'll be fine. That being too crazy, but also, you know, will stand out on its own a little bit, so it'll look nice. Oh man, I wasted a lot of paint there. Oh well, that's okay. Worse things have happened. We'll just leave their shirts white. I think that will be fine. Alright, that's one tie. Oh, and you know what, too? We're going to do one more thing before we move on to the shade, too. They're wearing some belts with some really, really prominent belt buckles, and I just imagine those being made of, you know, brass or something like that. So we'll just take out some brass color or something like that, and we'll do that with the belt buckles really quickly. Nothing too fancy. Should take just a second. Let's do these ties first. The ties on the skeletons are actually tucked into the vests that they're wearing, or the shirts or whatever, so they're not going to be quite as prominent. That's okay. You can kind of see them just barely. That'll be fine. Doesn't have to look too fancy or nothing. Okay, that'll do fine. Rinsing that off, and now let's grab... I didn't have that brass color out, so I gotta find... I'm just gonna use this ancient bronze color here. I've used it several times. Little tiny drop. Don't need anything at all. Little tiny, almost insignificant amount. And you know, another thing that I just thought of too is that the actual belts are kind of showing a little bit too. I'll tell you what, while we're thinking about it, and I think while that black is still a little bit wet, yeah, why don't we just... There we go. Just kind of get on either side of the buckle. Just kind of filled in with a little bit of black. Yeah, that'll be fine. Let's do the same thing to this guy. There we go. Yeah, that's fine. That'll work out just fine. Perfect. All right. And you know what? I kind of want to make sure that everyone is fully, completely, totally dry. So I'm going to give them just a couple of minutes to dry. I'll be right back. All right, and I think that those guys are nice and dry now, just fully dry everywhere, which is what we were looking for. So now let's move on to our handy-dandy Citadel brand Agrax Earth Shade. This stuff is great. And you know what? I'm going to try something a little bit different. So I had a request, well, a couple of requests, not just one request. I've had a couple of requests from some of my regular viewers to try and get into watering down my shades a little bit. I'm not going to lie, and getting into wet blending and that kind of thing, but I'm not going to lie, I'm really bad at it. I'm not very good at it at all. So we'll see what we can do here. I don't know if it's going to help any at all. We're just going to kind of experiment a little bit. So I'm just going to do my usual sort of thing where I don't even know how to really do this. Let's see here. Okay, tell you what, let's just kind of get some of this shade onto my plastic surface right here. Like so. Let's just kind of dip the tip of my brush into water here a little bit. This is going to water down the shade even more. I don't know if that's going to make a huge difference or not. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just supposed to help kind of to let the liquid kind of flow into the recesses of the miniature a little bit more easily. We'll see what happens. But yeah, when it comes to wet blending and that kind of thing, I'm really, really bad at it. I mean, as you might know with, you know, my previous videos, I've spent my whole life dry brushing. All of the, well, not all of, but most of the painting techniques that I know are all about dry brushing and not about wet blending or anything like that. So I'm really, really bad at blending with shades and really, really thin paints and that kind of thing because I have virtually no practice at it. So that's one thing that I would encourage you to maybe check out some other YouTubers for. I've talked about him on my channel before, but I will always refer you to Lucio from Lucio's Workshop. He's an Italian gentleman who's very, very, very good at painting miniatures. He is definitely an expert, and when it comes to wet painting, wet blending, and all that kind of stuff, he is definitely the person to really, really look for. He's much better than I am. He deserves much higher praise than I do. Yeah, definitely check out his stuff. I will put a link to his channel in the description for this video below. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So he's looking nice and blended there. All right, so let's just get a little bit more onto my little brush here. Kind of wipe it off, just a little bit more water on the tip of my brush. Let's see what we do here. Okay. Oh, I don't know if I said this or not, but I'm using a medium shader right now. This is a Citadel brand shading brush. It's designed specifically for kind of soaking up really, really thin, you know, very watered down paints and substances and that kind of thing. So it's good for shades. That's what it's for, is doing shading stuff. So yeah, that's the kind of brush that I'm using here. Why don't we try this? I'm going to take my shade and I'm going to apply it normally, just all around. Okay, and then we'll just kind of dip the whole thing in water, and we'll just kind of let go over the whole thing with water a little bit. Maybe that'll kind of even some stuff out. Maybe that's the kind of thing that we're going for with wet blending here. That actually does look pretty good. Maybe that's how you're supposed to do shading and wet blending and that kind of thing. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. Tell you what, let's do a control test. So yeah, that looks good. We'll go ahead and just stick that skeleton where he's at. Okay, so for this hired gun, let's use just shade. So I'm just going to apply shade all over the whole miniature. See how he looks. And then for the other hired gun, what we'll do is we'll do the shade normally, but then we'll go ahead and just apply a little bit of a kind of a thin layer of water around the whole thing too. We'll see if it looks any different, better, worse, the same, you know, whatever. Let's just take it one step at a time here. I don't like to try to pretend that I'm an expert painter or anything like that. I am definitely not, but I like to try to do paint jobs that are accessible to others. You know, I like to try to do things at you know, relatively simple levels so that anyone can get involved in it. And with that being said, why don't we try to learn some stuff together? If you're a new painter, if you're a novice painter, and you're here just learning how to paint miniatures, let's learn some stuff together. So let's figure out how to do some wet blending a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that looks pretty decent right there. So now we'll let that lone gunman, or that hired gun, sit. And now we're going to go over the second one with our shade, but then after we get the layer of shade all over, we're going to go over with a layer of water. We'll see if it looks any better, worse, different, the same, whatever. Yeah, because I'm late to the shade game. I didn't start using shades until last year sometime. I did all dry brushing techniques all my life up until about last year. But I gotta say, shades do make painting a lot easier, and it's easier to knock out stuff on a quicker level and all that good stuff. Okay. All right, so now we've got the shade all over this guy. So now let's just take a little bit of water. Let's just load up some water onto our shader here, and let's just apply some water all around. We'll see what that does. It's going to take longer to dry, obviously, but we'll see what happens, if there's any difference. Yeah, okay. it's going to be obvious which one was the water one and which one was the regular shade one. The water one's got a lot of brown on the base here, and the regular one does not. So I'm going to let all of those dry. I'm going to give those a while. I don't know how much time. I'll just check back periodically. But I will be back in a moment. Well, those guys seem to be completely dry now, and yeah, I can definitely tell a pretty clear difference, but I'm not sure if I like the watered down version that I did. So this is the one that I just used the regular shade on. I just kind of, you know, applied it and just let it dry, and it's got some real good shadows in there, nice good dark recesses there, and here you can tell that, I don't know what, but you know, you just the shirt, for example, you can see is a huge difference. This one, the recesses aren't quite as dark, and because of that, I think that it looks a little bit flatter. I don't know. I'll mess around with some more shade stuff though, just to see if there are any major differences that I can find. And I also might need to figure out something to do with the skeletons here. Oh, you know what? I have an idea for something. How about let me get out a little bit of black. Just a little tiny bit, and I think that this will help with what I'm gonna do here. I'll just get out a little tiny brush, nothing major. Why don't we just kind of dab the buttons on the shirt? Maybe that'll make it stand out a little bit better. Let's do this. I would say you don't have to worry about this if you don't want to, but I'm just gonna do this for my own sake really quickly. There we go. That just adds a little bit of little tiny bit of color variety to the skeletons. Okay, and I think that what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and use the regular shade here on the hired gun here, because I think that I kind of prefer the not watered down version, but that's a personal taste. Otherwise, that's it. What I'm also going to do off camera, I'll spare you guys here, is I'm going to go ahead and paint all the bases black. So thank you everybody for watching. If you want to see more Mansions of Madness miniatures being painted, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you just want to see more nerdy, you know, hobby board game stuff in general, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I also do a little bit of stuff with video games and that kind of thing, although I haven't been doing as much with just plain old video games recently. That might change at some point, I don't know. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of fade out to this, and I'll just you know, you'll see the end result for the final site here. So thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next time on Let's Paint a Mini. Bye.